and I'm not sure very many people would have seen this coming. It's the LA Kings. Our colleague Chris Gear has a story up at dailyfaceoff.com about this team. And one of the lines is, if we didn't notice the LA Kings before, it might be time to pay attention. And I think that's bang on, Frank. They have 65 points in 54 games. Last season, they only had 49 points total in the shortened 56-game season. Guys like Adrian Kempe, 25 goals for Kempe, unreal. You see Arvidsson and Dano there. They're both likely going to hit 20 goals this season. Quick and Pedersen have both been consistent and solid for this team. Heading into the deadline, Kings aren't going to be sellers, Frank, but how aggressive do you think they'll be on the buying front?
Yeah, I think they're a real wild card team. I think that they're in the mix on a lot of different things in terms of how they could potentially improve their team. But I think the key to look at is it's probably not going to be on the rental front. This is a team that's building for the next number of years. And I sort of view the Los Angeles Kings at this point as a lowercase version or the Western Conference version of where the New York Rangers are at the moment. You look at the Rangers, they're in contender mode with how they've played this season. They've got cap space. They've got star players. They've got their goaltender. They've got their Norris Trophy winner on the back end. And the Kings, maybe their core is a little bit longer in the tooth when you have Kopitar there and you have Drew Doughty. But when you look at the Los Angeles Kings and what they have coming, the prospects that they have in their pipeline, maybe second only to the New York Rangers in terms of that pipeline and sort of top end ability. Some would say that the Kings have the best, and we could ask Chris Peters this in our next wave edition that we'll talk to shortly. But this is a team that has so much going for it, so much on the way. And so when you look at that, they're really in an enviable spot. They have maybe a little bit of cap flexibility, not a ton at this year's deadline, but they're in a spot where they could move some of those assets if they feel like they could get a piece with some term, maybe a guy like Jacob Chikrin that they could be in the mix for. It certainly seems to be some interest there from Rob Blake and the Kings. But there's lots of different directions that the Kings could go to add pieces that can help them both now and in the future, which I think is so key.
Yeah, and you also wonder, you look at that pipeline, so loaded, so many waves coming through that system. You wonder if maybe that leaves them more open to maybe dealing a first or a second round pick in these upcoming drafts, just because, with the amount of guys coming up, like, you can almost be a little bit more willing to move those picks, no?
Well, yeah, I think that's part of it. But the other truth of it, and this is what other teams with loaded pipelines will also be facing at a certain point. And people thought I was actually nuts when I brought up the idea of Braden for the New York Rangers. You've got Fox on the right side. You've got Trouba on the right side. As good as Braden Schneider looks, tell me where he's going to play the next number of years. Teams are at some point aren't going to have spots available for all these players. I mentioned the Sens. They're going to be in a similar spot at some point when they get to be really competitive. You can't keep everyone. And if you've had an ability to evaluate, maybe there's a team out there that values one of your prospects more than you do, and you could potentially make a swap on that front. So picks, prospects, you name it. LA is going to be a place to be for the next number of years in the NHL.